Okay, so I've played Shadow from 60 to 65, doing dungeons and PvP, so I've had a chance to play around with the talents and abilities. So I feel like I can go over kind of what worked, what didn't. Like the other videos I've done, it's going to be one video with two parts. So the second part will be me resetting the talents. If you want to know how that how I got to where I am now, how that process went, kind of the theory crafting behind that, and then the first part will be the simplified overview after I've had a chance to kind of play around with everything. So, welcome to the simplified overview for Shadow Priest. I'm not too familiar with Shadow Priest. I've always wanted to play Shadow Priest, but trying to queue as a DPS in previous expansions or patches can be uh, could be somewhat difficult, if not arguably impossible. So it actually has been going fairly quickly in Dragonflight so far. So kind of wanted to switch over and see what Holy was like. Felt like 60 to 65 was a good enough um, span to kind of judge. I did change some things around. So as far as your abilities, first of all, you have pretty much what we've had. Um, Vampiric Touch applies itself and Shadow Word Pain. You have Mind Blast, Power Word Shield, Mind Flay, Void Eruption, Devouring Plague, which they added not too long ago. So I think this is the newest ability Shadow Priest has. And then Shadow Word Death. And then, of course, you still have your utilities. You have Dispersion, Vampiric Embrace, Leap of Faith, because what self-respecting priest wouldn't have Leap of Faith? Um, you have Mindbender, which actually starts out as where is the talent? There we go, Shadow Fiend. So I usually have always replaced it. I think most Shadow Priest have usually. You have Fade. You have an Interrupt, which I've hardly ever used at this point. Um, you have Desperate Prayer, which I don't remember Shadow Priest having in the past. I thought this was a holy only ability at one point. Is rather nice to have for Shadow Priest, though, which I will go into momentarily. Of course, Mind Control, Mind Vision. You have Levitate, Psychic Scream, um, Purify Disease, which is not all that helpful. Which, again, I will go into here momentarily. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Um, I didn't take Mass Dispel. I think that was a class ability, baseline ability that each specialization had. Um, and then, of course, you have your reincarnation, um, power word fortitude, which increases stamina as it always has. So, as far as the talents, so I did start leveling at 50. So you do get a point every other level. You get a point for either your overall priest abilities or your specific shadow abilities. So the only thing new that I added as far as the shadow talents was I'd kind of moved some things around and then took some things again later on. Um, so I took your shadowy apparitions now deal 15% increased damage and generate 1 insanity. That seems to be somewhat beneficial. They kind of have a AoE effect, so that seemed more worthwhile. Um, and then I just took while channeling Mind Flay, your Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain on your primary target deals damage 40% faster. Um, Working my way, I had swapped out Idol of Yogg Saron, um, partially because I couldn't tell if it was doing anything, and partially because I just wanted to play around with other things. So I think I swapped it out for the buffing the apparitions, and then took it back later. I'm working towards Idol of Cthulhu, which will summon either a Void Tendril or a Void Larsh. Um, so I'm going to see how that works. So each one in the towards the last point you can put in is an old god um, themed ability. So the Void Lasher is a Void Tendril, of course, works very similar to how the Trinket works. If you have the Trinket or the one ability that um, Shadow Priest had at one point, it's just a Void Tendril. The Void um, Lasher is um, I think like a shadow kind of along the lines of like what Shadow Fiend look like, if I'm thinking correctly, something like that. Um, so either or should be good. I figure we'll take it and see. I should get a few more points. I need to put another point into Screams of the Void, and then which takes it from dealing damage 40% faster to 80, and then Idol of Cthulhu, Cthulhu, Cthulhu. Yeah. Um, And then for the priest abilities, so I moved some things around. Um, well, as not to get ahead of myself, I did want to mention. So I did try to swap out um, Shadow Crash. Um, couldn't really find anything else that I preferred to have the way the talent trees are set up now. And I'm kind of glad because once I actually started playing around with it, so Shadow Priest does perfectly fine in a dungeon, providing your gear is somewhat worthwhile. I was horribly behind from where I should have been gear wise. Um, Also, if you can get your haste to at least 10%, I would say that seemed to have quite a bit of a benefit as well as far as my overall damage. Um, it had been below 10%. And um, so between just doing PvP mostly, that's where I've gotten most of my gear from at this point, which has been a huge upgrade every time I've gotten something. And then I did make a couple uh, pieces of gear with jewel crafting. Um, a ring, and a necklace, which have gems that level with me. So, went with haste and versatility because that was what was lowest. That was what I wanted to get up. That benefits everything. Um, Mind Blast will cast quicker, and Mind Flay will channel quicker. So, overall, a pretty good stat to have. So once I started getting, once my haste was over 10%, that seemed to make a pretty significant difference. if you remember how reforging went, such a important difference between that one being above or below that, just that 1% you need for any particular um, class or spec. Um, so that is more than worthwhile. And being able to, especially in PvP, being able to apply all of your dots, even though they all are applied with Vampiric Touch, being able to apply all your dots at the same time and then just focus on your single target abilities, like Mind Blast and Mind Flay. And then I took Insanity. Um, where is it here? There we go. So every time Devouring Plague is applied, it transforms Mind Flay into Mind Flay Insanity. Um, so I kind of end up just going back and forth between applying Devouring Plague, which will stack, so you can apply it multiple times to the same target and it will stack. It just adds the damage, um, whatever damage was left over to the new um, dot, and it also heals you for a percentage of that damage. So it kind of works, if I'm thinking correctly, it works along the same line that Ignite did at one point, or does, where it just keeps applying the same damage to um, the new damage over time effect. So I just kind of end up going back and forth. Um, as far as using Void Eruption, it's kind of up to you when you want to use it, because you're going to be using it for one of two things. Either for the AoE damage that it does when you first use it, or the large amount of single target damage after you use it. So it just kind of depends on when you want to use it. It's not really something you have to use, and it's not something that, either way, you don't have to use it, you can ignore it. Either way, you're going to be fine. It just kind of depends on the um, fight that you're in. If you're in a dungeon and you're fighting some, some mobs, go ahead and use it. It's perfectly fine. I found it more useful there than trying to use it on the boss. If you're in PvP and you're fighting over, been doing a lot of Seething Shore. If you're fighting over a node and it's like 2 versus 1, and you're trying to take down a paladin or something that's a bit difficult to take down, I'll use it just for the single target damage, just to kind of add pressure. Um, and you can actually keep the nice thing about it, and this has been the thing for a while, is that as long as you have the insanity, it'll stay active. It doesn't expire. So you can kind of go back and forth. You kind of have to be careful because Devouring Plague also uses insanity. However, you should be getting instant cast from Mind Blast. If we look here, there was an ability that I took. That makes it an instant cast ability. There we go. Shadow Word Pain periodic damage has a chance to reset the cooldown on Mind Blast and cause your next Mind Blast to be instant cast. So that actually triggers quite often, especially with Shadow Crash. So between the two, if you're using Mind Blast or Shadow Flay to generate Insanity, you can kind of just keep using Void Bolts, which is what Void Eruption will turn into, and really apply pressure and do quite a bit of damage to one target. And then when it's off cooldown, that's perfectly fine. You have other things. Like I said, you're running through your rotation. maybe using Vampiric Touch if Shadow Crash is on cooldown or it's just not an appropriate time to use it. You want to use it when you have multiple targets. Um, so Mind Blast, Mind Flay, Devouring Plague, um, just kind of running through that rotation, um, depending on what other utilities you're using at the time. Um, so Shadow Crash is definitely worth taking, whether you're doing dungeons, whether you're doing PvP. It's kind of universal for both. Um, let's see here. Was there? I think that was it for the Shadow talents. Yeah. So, okay. Now for the priest talents. So I kind of swapped some things around. I had Divine Star, which I wanted to take to play around with. Like most abilities that target um, enemies right in front of you, it's really, it's almost worse. It's really kind of trial and error on whether it works. If you're going to be doing Mythic Plus or raiding, this might be more beneficial. Um, Normally, with an ability, you think about like a knockback ability. It affects things right in front of you. So there's a chance it might affect something, it might not. With this, by the time you actually cast it, whatever you're aiming at might have moved out of the way. So I wasn't really getting a lot of benefit from this. So I played around with it for the longest time, and then decided that it just wasn't giving me much of a benefit. So I swapped it out for Power Word Shield instantly heals the target for uh, 2,000 and reflects 12% of damage absorbed, which seemed to be more useful when I was playing around with Disc. I also had increases the maximum health gained from Desperate Prayer by 8%. So I should have known this since I primarily heal. Getting a um, getting your health increased does no good if you can't heal yourself that extra amount or you're not getting healed for that extra amount. So this really wasn't doing anything. I was healing and then it was still showing that I had a large portion of my health gone. Um, so it just really wasn't beneficial. So I swapped basically everything over one. I kind of looked more towards the healing side. I kind of wanted to buff up Desperate Prayer as much as I could, and nothing really stood out. So when I saw Crystalline Reflection, this worked perfectly well. It kind of works like a heal over time in a way with a shield. Because you're constantly reapplying it to yourself, so you're constantly getting healed. If it does fall off and you're taking damage, you can throw it on yourself and you'll get healed. It's reflecting damage. It's just an all around good passive to have. As I've often preferred to do, it's a passive that already takes something I have and makes it better. Angelic Baldwork, um, works perfectly fine. The cooldown's not a terrible drawback. It kind of works like a cheat death or a what is it, like Nature's Guardian that Shaman have that kind of lets you cheat death one time. Um, it works perfectly fine. Of course, Fade to reduce damage, reduce cooldown. Now, I did try Mind Games again, and it actually seems to be working well. I seem to be getting more of a benefit from it than I was when I tried to play around with it with Discipline. And I think comparing the two, I think I had too many cooldowns with discipline. Um, I had power infusion. I had light wrath. Um, I had mind games. I had something else, I think. Um, so I was trying to figure out kind of what to use for what. So I basically ended up swapping out um, Divine Star for mind games, and I seem to be getting more of a benefit off of it. So the way I have things set up now, I either use mind games, Shadow Crash, or situationally power infusion, depending on what I'm doing. So I have something I can use in whatever situation I'm in, or altogether, depending on how long the situation goes on. Sometimes in PvP, I'll end up using all three. Um, I also went a little deeper into this and took the passive that Mind Blast will reduce the cooldown. So it's a 2 rank passive. So the first one is just for half a second, and then the second one is a full second. So I'll probably finish that and then go down to Shattered Perceptions, which extends the duration of mind games and increases uh, the amount of damage, um, 25% initial damage, and reverses an additional 25% damage or healing. So just buffs it up a little more. You can use it in dungeons. It works perfectly fine. You don't get so much of the reverse effect from what I could tell, unless you actually had a boss that had like a healing effect mechanic. Um, the damage is not bad though. Especially like I said, as I've been uh, getting moving up in level and kind of getting my gear more where it should be. Um, Abilities are starting to kind of level out and work like they should be. So this worked perfectly fine. I might take another look at it for um, discipline. Um, there's been quite a few times in PvP I will use mind games as kind of an opener, and then vampiric touch, and then as soon as I can, devouring plague. So you end up putting 4 dots on the target at one time, and depending on what class you use it on, if you use it on a paladin, a priest, um, those have been the ones that I've seen die the quickest when I've used it, because they're a little more a little bit more heavy on healing and things like that, um, which is kind of nice to see. It's very gratifying when you use an ability and then the target just dies. Um, so, yeah. Other than that, a very solid build, a very good build, I would say. There wasn't too much. Again, I didn't necessarily take everything I would have preferred to take. I took some things maybe I didn't want to. Um, I didn't have to take too many abilities um, that I didn't want to. There's always usually like 1 or 2 spells that you just kind of never end up using. Usually I find so I was able to avoid those, like with mind shear. Um, I just never used it for whatever reason, and I think as far as an AOE, Shadow Crash does much better. The cooldown's not terribly long. Same thing with Mind Games, especially with the passive that Mind Blast is reducing damage. Because bear in mind, it's still getting a benefit from um, Shadow Word Pain, so you'll get procs to use it more often than just the two charges. Um, so it all kind of works together better now. So I can keep myself alive with um, the damage from, or the healing from Devouring Plague, Power Word Shield, Desperate Prayer, um, Fade. Um, you have things to use. Um, I've avoided dying a few different times, just kind of popping everything in PvP. Um, did actually go one on one with a is it a warlock, mage, priest, something caster type in PvP. Um, again, using mind games first, just kind of getting your dots, running through your rotation and everything. There's something to be said for Devouring Plague and Mind Flay. You can really just kind of go back and forth with these two. Devouring Plague stacking on itself, of course, as I said. Mind Flay is turning into Mind Flay Insanity, doing more damage. So it's not a terrible build. It does take some getting used to. I'm used to channeling Mind Flay as kind of a filler ability, so to speak, when Mind Blast is on cooldown or um, Void Eruption was or something like that. So it kind of gives you an extra ability. You have to. At first, I noticed I was kind of tunneling kind of one thing, um, which is also good taking mind games because it kind of makes you constantly think about if you need to reapply something or do something different. Um, so you're not just sitting there kind of doing the same thing in a loop, which can be good and bad depending on your class and situation. So, yeah, and then as far as PvP talents, I did try a few different things. So, Void Eruption and Dark Ascension are now instant cast, so that is very nice for a Void Eruption. 20% of all damage you take is stored. The stored damage cannot exceed 15% of your maximum health. The initial damage of your next Shadow Word Pain deals this stored damage to your target. So that seems to be working fantastic. What did I use before this? I think I used reduces the cooldown of Shadow Word Death by 12 seconds. That vaguely sounds right. While Void Form is not active, being attacked will reduce the cooldown of Void Eruption by 3 seconds. I think I swapped it out for that at one point. Um, yeah. Not a great selection of abilities for Priest for PvP. And then your Power Word Shield reduces all physical damage taken by 50% while the shield persists. So that is stacking with um, the 12%. Well, reduces physical damage taken. So think like warrior, melee attacks, things like that. Which priests are a clothy, so you can be very vulnerable, extra vulnerable to melee attacks. So yeah. So there you go, folks. There was the simplified overview for Shadow Priest. And now in the second part is where I will reset the talents. Okay, so I want to set up Shadow. I have been playing as Discipline. That's why I have 4 talent points available there. So this is what the default setup was when last I switched over to Shadow. So we are going to reset that. And I'm going to try not to spend too much time on the priest abilities, focus more on the shadow abilities because they're exactly the same for um, every spec. So dispel magic, yes. Purified is yes. Um, so this is in addition to this, right? Yes. Yes. Okay. I think it works differently than it does for discipline because it's just an add-on to purify for discipline. Um, okay, so we have Shadow Fiend by default. Reduces the cooldown of Psychic String by 15 seconds. Sure. We use that quite a bit. Activating Fade removes all snare effects. Sure, that'll come in handy later on down the tree here. If your Shadow Word Death fails to kill a target at or below 20% health, its cooldown is reset, cannot occur more than once every 20 seconds. If a target dies within 7 seconds after being struck by Shadow Word Death, you gain 30 insanity for 4 seconds. Over 4 seconds. Sure. Mind control. Probably mind control. Increase the amount of damage required to break your psychic screen. Damage may interrupt this effect. Okay. Or Void Tendrils. I'm actually going to take Void Tendrils to be different because I'm pretty sure for Discipline I took Sheer Terror. So we will be a little bit different. Don't really want Renew. I already have Desperate Prayer and Flash Heal. Increases the healing done by your Flash Heal. I don't really plan on using Flash Heal. Of course, Shadow Priest has Vampiric Embrace, so that's going to be what I'm using a lot of the time. I don't really even use Desperate Prayer. It's more of kind of an emergency ability. I would like Leap of Faith, though. So, again, I guess I could take Angelic Feather. I guess you could do kind of a hybrid build here. I never really get to play Shadow because as a DPS, of course, it takes longer to queue for everything, so I always end up just playing Disc, and Disc was what really, um, since Legion and the changes to Disc, I've played Priest more consistently, I think would be the way to say it. I had a Priest character, I just never did anything. Um, with uh, with her. It was actually quite hard to level back in the day. Shadow Word Death deals 75% less damage to you. This deals damage to me. A word of dark binding that inflicts to the target. If the target is not killed, the caster takes damage equal to. Oh, okay. Um, do do I even want this? Which shows you how much I pay attention to it. I honestly, it's always been a baseline ability, and I've hardly ever used it. So if I didn't, which direction would I go down? Let me try to go down the tree a little more. So if I, because this, Yeah, I should be able to remove these, but then it'll lock the tier up here. So, okay, I want Leap of Faith. It's a good ability to have, even if it is somewhat situational. Do I want Mass Dispel? Hmm. This is where not knowing for sure what I'm going to be doing with Shadow comes into effect here. So, okay, so I can remove that. Okay, so you get Shadow Word. You get Shadow Word Death by default, like I said. Okay, so the question then is, do I want to take one talent point? Um, so if your Shadow Word Death fails to kill a target at or below 20% health, its cooldown is reset. Which means I end up taking double the damage if it fails twice. I do like the idea of getting more insanity, though. I'm gonna leave it for now. If I find that's a problem, I can come back to this. Because, as I said, I really don't use Shadow Word Death, so. Vampiric, yes. Um, okay, so Power Infusion's probably good, yes. Mass Dispel. I don't think I'll need this. We're mainly questing and leveling at the moment. Um, when cast on yourself 30% of your damage you deal refills your power word shield. Okay, that's good. Reduces the cooldown of Vampiric Embrace by 45 seconds and increases its healing down by 25. Yes. You can get quite a bit of healing out of that if you use it at the right time. Your Mind Blast critical strikes reduce your target's movement speed by 75% for 4 seconds. Yes. Power Word Infusion also grants you 100% of its effect when used on an ally. I always just use it on myself. So, your Power Word Shield, Leap of Faith, increase the target's movement speed by, yes. While above 75%, the cast time of your Flash Shield is reduced. After damaging or healing a target above 35% health, gain 5% increased damage and healing for 8 seconds. Yes. I misread this as kind of having a Shadow Word Death effect. I thought it was saying, um, or I misunderstood the damage and healing. I don't know. I read it weird and skipped over it, and then went back and looked and was like, no, no, no. This is fine. So yeah, yeah, yeah. That's probably fine. Yeah. Uh, Shadow Word Pain deals an additional 30% damage when it dies. When a enemy dies while afflicted by your Shadow Word Pain, gain 3 insanity. Okay. That is actually a better version of this than it is for Discipline. Um, because it works with Shadow Word Pain and something else. and restores like 0.5% mana. I don't know, now I'm rethinking this. So I would need to fill 4. Yeah, I guess that's fine. I need 2 more with that. So, reduce cooldown of Leap of Faith by 30 seconds. Pull the spirit of a party or raid member, instantly moving them in front of you. Okay, so it doesn't heal. It used to heal, but I know that was there was something else that caused it to do that. I don't remember if it was a PvP talent in Legion when we had those for that brief period. Yes, I guess I'll take that, and then less damage to you. Yeah, so that kind of negates the negative effect. If I had read on instead of stopping and rethinking, and yeah, so Mind Games works weird. I played around with it on Discipline. It was um, it was a Covenant ability um, for the what was it, Venthyr. Um, Fade reduces damage taken. That is quite useful. Divine Star or Halo or a Shadow version of Halo. Don't think I actually need those. This is actually pretty good. Um, Although Halo does do AoE damage. I don't really have a good reliable AoE. You get Mind Shear, which is not great. I'm not. I've played around with it before. I haven't been all that. It's not all that reliable of an AOE, so Halo might not be terrible just to have something for AOE. Um, 30-yard radius healing allies and dealing. I mean, it does pretty good damage. So, what does Divine Star do? Throw a Divine Star forward. 24 yards, healing allies in its path and dealing shadow damage to enemies after reaching its destination. The star returns to you, healing and damaging in its path again. Healing reduced pound 6 targets. You know, I might actually take that just to play around with that, just to be different. Because I think that would get more use. Because I should be, if I did a dungeon, I should be behind the tank. The tank should have aggro, so that would actually make more sense rather than with Halo just kind of randomly doing damage and pulling things we don't need. Reduces cooldown of Fade. Okay, so I've got 3 left. Increases the maximum health gain from Desperate Prayer by 8%. No. Okay. Power World Shield instantly heals the target. Okay, so yes. And Void Shift, you and the current targeted party or raid member. Swap health percentages, increases the lower health percentage of the 2 by 25% if below that amount. Interesting. Is that very useful though? Hmm. Is that very useful? though. Amount of health gained from Desperate Prayer. Yeah, that's when an attack brings you below 30%. Health you gain an absorption shield equal to 50% of the amount of health, or 20% cannot occur. Okay, so that I think would be a little bit more beneficial than Void Shift. So let's put one in there. And then now we will start on the Shadow talents. So Devouring Plague, Dispersion, Shadowy Apparitions. Silence. Do I really need a silence? I don't know. There's not really anything. I'm going to skip it for the moment. Dispersion heals you for an additional 25% of your maximum health over its duration. Its cooldown is reduced by 30 seconds, and it has a cooldown of 2 minutes. Healing from Vampiric Touch and Devouring Plague. Heals you for 30% of the damage dealt. I did not realize that. When you are at maximum health, will shield you for the same amount. Shield cannot exceed the amount that it's... okay. Vampiric Touch. Also apply Shadow Word Pain to the target. Shadow Word Pain lasts an additional 5 seconds. Yes. That's why I don't have it on the bar. I don't know. I kind of like the shield. I kind of like... So the problem with taking passives that have drawbacks of cannot exceed X amount is enemies vary with what they do, is what I typically find. So as much as I like this, I think the increased healing and the reduced cooldown is probably better, because this is your emergency button as a Shadow Priest. So Mind Shear and Shadow Word Pain damage has a 4% chance to grant you Coalescing Shadows. And Mind Fray has a 50% chance to grant you Coalescing Shadows, stacking up to 3 times. Mind Blast and Mind Spike consume all Coalescing Shadows to deal an additional 10% increased damage per stack, and consuming at least one increases the damage of your periodic effects by 10% for 15 seconds. So basically increases the damage of Vampiric Touch, which also applies Shadow Word Pain. Mind Share. Oh, I haven't even taken it. Okay. Well, that I actually like. That's one of the few positive things for talents I can say, is you get... This is not a very good ability, generally speaking. So if I don't want it, I don't have to take it. Mind Spike. Okay, we'll try that. I need 2 more, because of course I do. So we'll take Silence. Reduce cooldown of Silence. Terrifies targets in place. Stunning them for 4 seconds. I'm actually going to take that, because I don't know Yeah, yeah, that's good. So, having two kind of CCs as DPS is pretty good. So, um, your Shadow Fiend and Mind Bender grant you Coalescing Shadows each time they deal damage. Damage from your shadowy apparitions has an 8% chance to grant you Coalescing. Okay. So probably yes. So again, so this is where you kind of have to be careful because you can go down this whole rabbit hole of trying to set your talents up around one effect like this. And if it's just rubbish, then the entire build just doesn't really work, obviously. So, a little bit of variety in here probably would be a good thing. Um, the duration of your Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch is increased by 1 second when enemies suffer Mind Fray or Mind Shear damage. Okay. That's pretty good. Increases your non-periodic shadow damage by 20 seconds. No. Void Eruption. Yes. That's how we get Void Bolt. Increase the chance for you to gain a Coalescing Shadows when dealing damage with Mind Shear or Shadow Word Pain by an additional by 2% and Mind Fray by 10%. You have 100% to grant. You have a 100% chance to gain a Coalescing Shadow when critically hit by any attack. This effect may only occur every 6 seconds. So if so, that would work with Vampiric Touch because it's applying Shadow Word Pain. You can never assume with abilities like this. Mind Blast gains an additional charge. Shadow Word Pain, periodic damage has a chance to reset the remaining cooldown. And cause your next Mind Blast makes yes. Void Form and Dark Ascension increase your critical strike chance by 10% for 20 seconds, reducing by 5 seconds. So that Void Form is what we get from Void Eruption. So I want to say yes. Hurl a slow-moving bolt. Slow-moving shadow energy. Hurl a bolt of slow-moving shadow energy at the destination, dealing shadow damage to all targets within 8 yards and applying Vampiric Touch to 8 of them. Well, now that could be interesting. I kind of like that. Might take that just to play around. Vampiric Touch has a 30% chance to generate 1. Then at each time it deals damage. That doesn't really seem like it's worth it. Your Mind Fray, Mind Shear, and Void Torrent. Void Torrent. Okay. Increase the damage of your next periodic shadow effects by 1%, stacking up 5 times. Mind Blast, Mind Fray, and Mind Spike deal 30% of their damage to all other targets affected by your Vampiric Touch within 40 yards. Your Mind Blast critical strikes generate an additional 2 insanity. So deal 60%. So I have things that are applying Vampiric Touch, which also applies Shadow Word Pain. So this could be good. So my previous statement, my earlier insinuation that Shadow Priest has no AoE is proving to be incorrect. There we go. And I still need 5 more. I'm assuming this little lock is here at different stages, so you don't just run down one tree and just um, complete it from start to finish, which, why would we want that? And then you could fill in the rest later. So it would be more nostalgic of how the older talent trees worked, but no, the older trees that everyone liked, I might add. Um, so, what haven't I taken? So, Mind Spike, I really don't want. Um, Mind Shear, I definitely don't want. Um, hmm. Generates an additional 2 insanity. That's okay. Insanity I've never really had an issue with when I have played Shadow Priest. And again, as I said, you can overcompensate and think, oh, I'm going to take these or that so I don't have an issue with it, and actually end up generating it too quickly. Because Shadow Priest doesn't actually need full to fill the bar, full insanity. I believe Void Eruption works at like each 25% is no. I think it works at like 40, 50%. I think it'll trigger. Um, so I need to spend 3 more. Vampiric Touch has a 30% chance to generate 1 insanity each time it deals damage, and it has a fairly long duration, right? Yeah. 21 seconds. 60% chance. Okay. Don't normally like passive abilities that only deal with like 1%. Need to take something though. Void Form, Dark Ascension, increase critical strike chance by 10% for 20 seconds, reducing critical strike chance by 20% for 20 seconds. Okay. Critical strike chance is always good. The irony. Okay. So, increases the initial damage of Devouring Plague by 75%, and the damage Mind Shear by 20%. Well, no, we're not using that. Instantly afflicts the target with Shadow Word Pain, Vampiric Touch, and Devouring Plague. Okay. Very similar to how the Warlock ability kind of applies, or deals. You apply the dots, and then it does damage. So kind of a variation on that. And then that's Void Torrent. So channel a torrent of void energy into the target, dealing shadow damage over 3 seconds. Okay. Well, that is a lot. Sadly, I don't need it though. between my damage over time and my direct damage, I'm actually good. Shadow Priest is probably one of the most balanced classes for abilities as far as AoE and single target, or not AoE, as far as damage over time and direct damage. Um, most of their abilities are actually, with the exception of Mind Shear, which for some reason you got as a baseline ability for a while. Most of their abilities are usually really good. Um, Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death cause your Mindbender to teleport behind the target. Slashing up to 5 nearby enemies for shadow damage, increasing the duration of your Mindbender by 0.5 seconds. Okay. While channeling Mind Fray or Void Torrent, your Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain on your primary target deal an additional target deals damage 40% faster, while channeling Mind Shear, your Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain on all targets deal damage 40% faster. Okay. Your Shadow Word Pain damage has a chance to reset the cooldown of Shadow Word Death and enable 150% additional damage regardless of the target's health. Devouring Plague transforms your next Mind Fray into Mind Fray instantly. Insanity. There we go. Mind Fray Insanity. Assaults the target's mind with shadow energy, causing shadow damage and slowing the movement speed. And this does shadow damage and slows the movement speed. So it's just kind of a buff. Devouring Plague transforms your... I like that. I like that a lot. Increases the initial damage of Devouring Plague. Right. Okay, I've already looked at that. I've already looked at that. Teleports behind the target. While channeling Mind Fray or Void Torrent. And I already read that. Increases the damage dealt by Shadow Word Death. Shadow Word Death. By 13%. Shadow Word Death deals 30% of its damage to all targets affected by your Shadow Word Pain within 40 yards. Okay. So that has synergy. So there we go. Okay. So we got some new abilities here. Yes, I know. So this I will put here. This I will put here. Get rid of you. And Void Tendrils I will put... oh dear. I may have taken one too many. Okay, you know what we're going to do? We are going to move this up here. Can I unlearn this? No. Let's say I was going to move that down here to, but no. Where's Void Tendrils over here? Rooting them, increases the amount of damage to break your, yeah, we'll just go with that. That'll probably work better, because I don't need 3 abilities at CC, so sadly we will have to wait to use Void Tendrils, so yeah, I feel good about that, so Okay. Uh, well, rooting up to, wait a minute here, let me see. 30, 45 seconds, and then a minute. So, well, actually, hold on. I'm being indecisive here. So, I can actually, where to go? Oh, there it is. There we go. Okay. So, yes, I can actually move that there. So, yeah. So, if need be, I have the CC for, yeah. So, it's in order of cooldown, which is perfectly fine. So, let me see. What am I not using? Shadow Crash. Did I take Shadow Crash? Shadow. Oh, apparently I did. That's right. It's and applying okay. So I will move that here. I'm thinking because I need to move power infusion here. That's where it is on discipline, so that's where I'm gonna remember it being. Mind soothe, which they will attack you. Okay, that could be beneficial somewhere. Just set that there for now. Okay. And that's everything, right? Yes. And yes. So, okay. Well, there you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching.